to it was writing everything out in like very long, kind of drawn out paragraphs, which I think lots of people do when they're first starting off, just because they don't necessarily have like a certain system of going about it. But now what I do is I will normally write a quick outline of various events that I would like to see happen during the session. So these could be combats, these could be role-playing encounters, these could just be things that PCs run into, or things that PCs told me in the last session they want to do. And then so I put that in just into a general outline. And then beneath that, I will start writing out in more detail, get each point and flesh it out in subheadings. So I mostly do everything in bullet points now. So once I go through all of those major things, I read through it to make sure that everything I want to see happen is in there, and then I will delete the first part and just have my expanded notes for that. And then during the actual session, I'll just go through the notes. Sometimes I'll underline or highlight things that we got to or didn't get to, and then if I have anything left over, I'll try to incorporate it in another session, or it may just not be relevant for the campaign whatsoever, so I just scrap it or save it for a much later time. That's generally how I go about it.
Okay, that's really cool. So, actually, do either one of you guys have questions for how my Weekend Master preps his sessions?
So this conversation is about like preparation for sessions and things like that.
Yep. It's preparation for sessions and how you take notes for sessions prior, and then how do you prepare for the next session coming.
Right. Okay. I feel like I'm a very organized person, but when it comes to preparing for sessions, for some reason, I'm just really not good at being organized about it. I keep a lot of it in my head, which is like great because I don't have to reference anything. But then, 2 months later, if I'm trying to remember something that happened and I don't still have it in my head, it can be a problem.
So I had the exact same problem as you did, Crisis. But one thing that I'm doing, actually, the start of this campaign that I'm currently running, is I have changed to I'm using everything in my head until the moment I tell it to the characters. So the brief seconds that while my players are taking notes, I'm using that to write down my notes on what I had in my head too. So I do have it to reference.
Oh, okay. That's a pretty good way of making sure that all gets out there somehow eventually. Because I often find that like if I'm trying to make notes before a session, I'm like, what kind of format am I trying to put this in? And then I get inconsistent with it. So I feel that's actually a really good strategy. I feel is taking notes as the players are doing things.
I've tried that. For me specifically, that doesn't work, but I encourage you, Kairos, to at least try it to see if it works for you.
Yeah.
The way that I would recommend for you to do is, this. I think doing it my way requires a lot more determination, and you can't be a procrastinator with it, or else you'll fail. And basically, it's after the session. You don't take notes right after the session. You wait a day, and then you take notes the next day when you've had some time for your mind to recuperate from DMing, and you take thorough notes and just basically regurgitate everything. And I like to do it in bullet format. That way, I just say, hey, here's a bullet note. It can be written in any kind of sloppy secondhand or short script that I want, because it doesn't really matter. As long as I know what I'm talking about, that's all that matters, because no one else is going to be looking at my notes.
I actually like that a lot too. I definitely, if I committed to doing it the day after, I know that I would stick with it. So I think both of those would be viable options. I'll have to give them a shot, and I can let you know how they go.
Yeah, I think you should definitely do that, Kairos. Does anyone else have any other tips to help out Kairos in his note taking after a session?
I think it kind of depends on partially on your players, but like like with what I do, like so I don't know what your situation is, but all of the people that I run for, we all go to school together, and so I see most of them
Mm-hmm.
throughout the week at least once. So a lot of them will be asking, I'm like, oh hey, so like one of their characters' name is Tywin. I'll be like, so what's Tywin thinking like right now? Like what is he wanting to do, or like what are his next goals? And I'll kind of ask that. Sometimes like if I don't have anything else prepared, or they kind of end at like a low in the area, because I run a very sandbox style campaign. Ask and kind of see what it is that they're looking to do, or what they're looking for, or kind of what their ulterior motives or their different goals are. And so I'll try and accommodate to that based on what they're going to do, like how that would play out in the world that I've created. So, for example, like last time, I knew that they were going to, I knew they wanted to go to this one island, and they were looking for this specific type of metal that is only on this one island, but there's only one person that knows how to make it, and he's off island. And I knew that, so when they got that to them, and then they were like, oh well, whatever, and then they like still went around on island for a little bit, but I had also heard from one of the other players that he wanted to go to this other island called Mistrum, where it's very magic oriented, and there's this very large like wizards school, and I knew that they were going to go there and try and see if they could get work. So I knew that those things were probably going to be constant, so I did not have anything pre-prepared for that. Place. So like a couple days before, I wrote like 2 little short adventures that they would be able to choose from if they eventually did end up going there.
Mm-hmm.
So like what's an example of like something where like you've like kind of had issues?
I think the main thing so I have a very good memory. The problem is I rely on it so much for it to ever happen, and I didn't have a good memory anymore. Or if it's one of those situations that do inevitably come up where I just don't remember that like stray piece of lore or something like that, or about what happened in a session or something like that, that's where I tend to I'm like, oh, I should have taken better notes, because I do take notes every session. Just I feel like they're often the bare minimum of, oh, do this next session, rather than like a summary of what happened, so that if I forget, I can go back and look. And often I feel like having I really kind of like the idea of what Khalil was saying with the next day, just sort of summarizing in bullet points, because I feel like on the fly, I'm just not a very good note taker. And but afterwards, I can recount it very well. So I think that's sort of the thing with me, is I'm relying on my memory a little bit more than I should.
Okay. I'm going to wish you guys a good evening. I have to go.
Oh, okay.
All right. Good evening.
All right.
Good night.
See you later.
Yeah, have a
Yeah.
fantastic night.
Here.
Bye.
See ya.
Okay. Actually, Kairos, so, I kind of didn't announce it in Discord because it was kind of a last minute thing. I didn't want to interrupt any of you guys in the daily dealings that you guys do. But I did a live stream last night where I basically showed how I do my after session decompress and prepping and whatnot. So if you want, I can share the video with you because I actually recorded it. And you don't have to watch the entire thing because it's like an hour something long live stream. But at the beginning, you can like watch the first, I think, 10-ish minutes, and it'll just show you how I just sit there and just throw up all the information and just reorganize it in a way that I can understand.
I would love that, actually. That would be great.
Yeah, honestly, yeah, that'd be.
I tried to. There was one live stream you posted about that I tried to make, but it was like I would only be able to meet the first 10 minutes of it, and then you were late, and so I was like, okay. So like, I definitely I would love for you to post in like in the announcements or something on Discord when you're live streaming, because I definitely want to make those if possible.
Okay. I'll definitely be more accurate on that. Actually, right after this call, I'm live streaming again in order to finish that prep work. So, I mean, if you guys want to join after this,
All right.
fully welcome to.
Yeah, I definitely might have a party I have to go to, and not too long, but I'll probably try and stop in for like 20 minutes or so if I can. Oh, also, I was wondering, were you planning on doing a live stream like on the new Unearthed Arcana that came out?
Which one?
It was a sorcerer origin and a warlock patron. There's the lurker and the what's up, Servo?
I haven't
There's the
seen
lurker and I can post it. It just came out yesterday.
Yeah, so post that, and then yeah, I'll be definitely doing that because I didn't even know there was another Unearthed Arcana, and I don't know if any of you guys saw the last one I did, but yeah, I was not satisfied with the Barbarian.
You weren't
Satisfied
satisfied?
with what?
The last Unearthed Arcana that came out with the monk,
Yeah.
the Wind Astral. Yeah, I was upset with the Barbarian a lot. Like I did not like it. I loved the monk. I think they finally fixed the overall monk class, but I hated the
The
Barbarian.
monk was really cool.
Yeah, I thought the
Let's
monk
see.
was cool. There's some
What was
JoJo's
that?
Bizarre Adventure.
Oh,
type stuff.
okay, yeah, the Wild Surge. I'm like, I was reading that and I was like, are you serious?
Look, I just hated the Barbarian because it's like, yo, this was nothing original. All it was is just taking stuff from other classes and then saying, yeah, we're just going to throw that up on top of the Barbarian. And then, like, I just felt like the fluff didn't even work. Like, I just did not like the class.
Okay,
at all.
well, I like the idea of there being wild magic surges on a rage. I just like, and I really didn't mind the concept of it. For me, it was just more the implementation was just like, way overpowered, and it was like you said, it wasn't original, so that certainly didn't help. It didn't feel true to the Barbarian class either. It's kind of just a mess. Like, I don't know, just not a huge fan of that one.
Yeah, that's exactly my issue. I honestly, when I was originally reading the flavor text, I was like, ooh, yes, this is going to be good. I think that the implementation and the route that they went with the Barbarian was like, ugh, that hurts my soul because this is so just not anything good.
Hello?
Hello?
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure if you had just stopped talking or if my connection went out.
No, I stopped talking.
Yeah. Okay, I don't know about any of you, but I've got this feeling, like, especially with that, wish they could make things more interesting without everyone having to have magic.
Honestly,
Yeah.
same. Like,
Every new feature has to be magic related, it feels like.
Well, I think, excuse me, for lots that I play with, like, they consider having access to magic like a deal breaker in choosing a class, just because having that access and then can lead to like significant changes or like significant advantages that you have compared to classes that don't have any magic using features. And I'm personally I think I personally fall into the camp of magic users and non-magic users should be not always equal in power, but should be equally interesting to play, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I understand where the interest is. I totally agree there. It's just like, okay, for example, the fighter, I would much rather play a Battle Master fighter than I would rather play an Eldritch Knight. Because I just find that they took something that they made it more interesting without making it magic related. And that just really speaks to me. Because even though I play a magic using character as many times as I can, I love the idea of playing a character in a world that's filled with magic that just, doesn't use magic, because not everybody has magic. So I don't think, my point isn't that like barbarians shouldn't have a magic subclass. My point is just every new Unearthed Arcana feature seems to always have to have magic in some form or another. And I would like to see, maybe just one every now and then that doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, you should check out the monk, because the new monk doesn't have any additional magic features. And I think something that will actually satisfy you, my Buken Master, is that the monk actually makes it super, super interesting to play that subclass, and it also crosses the distance between the current issues with linear fighters and quadratic wizards, where wizards just, not that they can deal so much more damage, because I have no issue with that, it's just that wizards just go to a point where they just have absolute craziness, and the fighter's like, I hate you with my stick. But, like,
yeah,
that's really what it is.
Well, yeah, it really is. It's like, I hit you with my stick, but now I can 5 times?
Exactly. But I think the new monk subclass, oh my god, it just makes everything so much more interesting and much more in-depth. And it actually literally changes the entire scope of the monk and makes it, 1, super powerful, and then 2, super interesting to play. And it gives you, I don't even think it gives you a lot of, it gives you more options while restricting your options. And in those few options that you have as the new monk subclass, you're just so much more cooler and much more customization, and you have that cool factor that any wizard or sorcerer would have.
Also, I'm not sure about you, but just the fact that they built on the astral self part felt like something that should have already been in the base class already, I felt like.
Yes. Honestly,
Yeah.
I feel like that subclass could have literally became its own entire class, and they could have really spent some time breaking it apart and making 2 subclasses on the light side of using an astral self and the dark side of using an astral self. So I completely agree that them diving into astral self was just delicious.
Yeah, that's one of the things that coming from 3.5 to going into 5e like really shocked me, because in 3.5, I mean, there's I don't know an exact number, but I mean, there's at least like 30 different classes that you can play just outright. I mean, not just like in the player's handbook, but just overall. And then when I switched over to 5e, and I was like, oh, I got like this handful here, and like that's neat. And then it's never really expanded off of that. I guess aside from like what's been introduced in Unearthed Arcana, but I'm really hoping that they're working on like another supplement book that adds a bunch of new classes, because while off the top of my head, I can't think of specific things that need to be like added in the game that can add like different unique roles to the game. I don't feel like an answer to that problem is just adding like subclass after subclass after subclass after subclass.
Real quick, did you hear? I forgot what it was, but there is a book that's being published that's going to have the Artificer in it.
Which
is
is
it
this?
really?
Eberron, I think. I think Eberron.
Are they coming out with like a formal Eberron? Is Wayfinder's Guide not official content?
I think you can play it in Adventures League, so it's official in that regard.
Are you talking about Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica?
No, Wayfinder's Guide to Eberron.
I don't think.
I'm not sure.
I don't think technically it's official. I don't know. I'll have to look into that, but I don't think technically speaking it is official. It's just like their Unearthed Arcana, or even like the Mystic.
I still go back and look at the Mystic pages, and I do mean pages if you've never looked at it, of the UA publication of it, and I've never played one because I still am very confused as to how I would, what the function is.
Yeah.
It's like, here are my points, and I use these points to pretend to be your class. Loser, and then I just kind of geek around for a little bit. It's how I assume you play it. But
yeah, I feel like they really need to come out with a book that is all about psionics and comes with 2 psionic classes.
I agree. I agree.
Same.
Like a psionics handbook.
I think
Because
actually to answer, I think it was Trisket that was saying this on how you wish that they would have more supplements with new classes. I think
Yeah.
that if they literally were to come out with another system that is easily grafted onto 5th edition, so like spellcasting is one system, like psionics would be an amazing system to use, or even like psionics I think would be great, and having an entire book dedicated to things that you can do as psionics, and then make new psionic classes, which would help give more classes to the overall edition. And on top of that, introduce a completely new system that will add just some nice flavor to the overall character abilities. I have actually played with a Mystic. They were one of my players, and the basic idea is if you're a DM, don't ever let your player play Mystic. It is so ridiculous. Like, I personally don't believe in there's ever such thing as overpowered, but he was overpowered. Like, if I were to actually throw things at him that could challenge him, I'd kill the entire party. And it was... So, on that standpoint,
Bruh.
It's terrible. As a player, it's the most delicious thing ever.
Yeah, so this is just an observation I've made. Because one of my players is a blood hunter, which I've never played, but I've played with someone who was a blood hunter. And he played it very wrong. And so I was like, oh, he was playing it wrong, and that's why it was overpowered. And the one I'm DMing for, he's the he's the potion one, the one that drinks all the mutagens. I think it's the mutagen. I don't remember. But I forget exactly what he did. I'm about to look it up so I can tell you all. But he's really an overpowered glass cannon type deal. But he did something recently. Like, I think he's gone to the realm of being a little too overpowered, and it's kind of my fault. Because I let him pick up this one feat, and I can't remember what it was. But I'll let y'all know in a second. But he did something. Y'all talk about something else. I'm gonna figure out what the fuck it was.
I just picked up a Blood Hunter in my game too. But it's actually interesting because I have a fun way of doing narrative incorporation. In that I basically played. So in my world, the area that they're currently in is like actively hostile to civilization because of the balance between like natural magic and the ability to control said natural magic. And the price you pay for being more effective in this area is losing your control of like the logical magic. So the act of becoming a blood hunter is kind of surrendering yourself to the wild a little bit. So there'll be some interesting story elements coming in here to balance, as well as like, I don't know, potentially him showing up as a party bad guy eventually. Who knows?
Yeah, I really like the idea of finding story-based reasons to not necessarily put a cap or limit on a particular class that's OP, but it's to kind of contextualize in the world why... find a way to contextualize in the world something that could be an additional challenge to them. Like if you're playing a mystic, you could say that okay, in this part of the world, or in this world in general, there's basically no other mystics than you. So that would mean, evil wizards may want to capture you and study you. Religious orders may view you as a threat to the stability of the cosmos. Extraplanar forces may want to, find this character and pull them on their side to fight against the other side. And if you are smart and aren't doing it in a way that feels like, oh, I just want to nerf this one particular character, it can be a very meaningful it can be a very meaningful challenge to that player and help them view their character and their very exceptional character based on their class in a whole other dimension than just the stats and the abilities in the game rules itself, and see it as a distinct character in the story of your world.
it's actually really interesting that you say that, because my character that is playing a blood hunter, when I talked to him about like what he wanted his like backstory and stuff to be, and how I can fit that into my world. Well, like we together came up with like a kind of like a legacy of like his people, and his people are blood hunters, and like where they came from. And like a long time ago, there was this great war, and they're from this particular ethnic group of humans called the Femzu. And when the war happened, the Femzu, as part of the war, were being hunted. And so they escaped and hid in the mountains, where they basically isolated themselves for a very long time, until this group of people who were basically like, quote, for lack of a better term, witch hunters, uh, found out that they were still alive. They're called the Brotherhood of Ravens, and they started hunting and wiping them all out. So it's almost exactly like how you described, how he's part of like this special group, and his people got all hunted down. And it's to the point where when he knows some of the stuff because that's how he grew up, but he was like 10 years old, and he took like a couple-day journey to go get some supplies from a nearby village, and then come back. And when he got back, his entire clan was gone. That they had found them, set it up, and hunted them, and killed pretty much all of them. And so he's the only one of his kind left in my world that he knows of.
I think that's a great example of contextualizing just a unique class in the world itself. I
I
really
like how you throw in that he knows of.
Well, actually last my campaign's my campaign, we've been playing about like 15 sessions or so. I don't know. It's been basically since like mid-July we've been playing.
Mm-hmm.
But he has met one other Femzu, but this Femzu came from a portal. I say portal. It's like what they call them tears, but he came from a tear. And he is ethnically a Femzu, but he's not from the same world, and so he's really different. And he was very malicious, and he was extremely religious, and this was causing him to just like kill people for being atheists, basically. Which in my campaign, they don't have a concept of what like a god would be. Like to them, a god would just be like a very powerful person that would be like revered, and people would look up to, like a leader of sorts, but not quite a king, somewhere beyond that. They really don't have a concept of that. And so they were sent to go find this guy. And the player, like under his breath, like said something in Femzu, because they have their own language. I gave him a free like little ethnic language that his people spoke. And so he said something, and the guy said something to him back, and he was like, wait, what? And so kind of getting that balance. And the guy that he's fighting also their abilities. And so it was really interesting to kind of throw that in there, but I was also introducing the concept of like what these tears in my world actually do. So it was pretty neat.
I love that. I love putting players' character decisions having an actual effect in the world, and whether or not they're the last of their kind, or there aren't very many of them in this area of the world, and having that be an actual staple of their character. And then honestly, Trisket, I think that was super smart of you to use that as a way to, one, get the player immediately hooked onto this NPC, and then even more importantly, get hooked into the part of, well, now there are these tears. And that, I think that was masterful by you, and I just enjoy when people do that to their players. And I actually need to start doing that for myself, because I've been kind of slacking in that game.
This is a very, very minor point, but I would like that you're specifically using the vocabulary of tears, because like portal and gate is so often used in like everything else that it just carries so much more of like a cultural meaning behind it whenever you say it, I feel like. So I just feel like it kind of helps make it sound like its own thing with your world when you call it something else.
Well, I definitely appreciate it because that's the effect that I was going for. Because I kind of I like to build off of my previous concepts of different things. Because if I were to call it a portal, that would be really mundane for what I actually mean that it is. Like it's not a coincidence that I went out and when they found one of these tears, they found like a really small one, and I had them roll an intelligence check, and only one of them got it, and it was the one who he's actually a noble, so he had a higher up education. I said, well, you remember when you were younger, your teacher Demarco had told you that there are these different things that are kind of popping up here and there, and they're calling them tears, and sometimes things go in and they never come out, but they've never really seen anything come out of them before. And then we get to a point where 10 sessions later, they're dealing with a person that came out of one of these tears, and he's talking about lands that don't exist to them, and it's not just a portal. Like it's going to like a different universe. They don't know this, but it's going to different realities. It's going to perhaps even different time periods. It's really a huge gamble as to where a tear might lead you. I haven't finished it, but I have 1,000, like a D1000 like table that I'm gonna roll on if they ever decide to jump in there, and just kind of hope that they don't all die. But I've made it pretty.
Do you have 1,000 things on a table?
Yeah, I've been working on it for a little bit.
I know Time Sabbath, when he got introduced to the concept of the Wand of Wonder, he came up with 1,000 things that could happen when you use a Wand of Wonder. Some of which are ridiculous. Like, one is you get turned into like a biker, like a Hell's Angel person. Other one is time just stops in your area for a minute. So when you actually use it, it seems like nothing happens, but everyone will be like 1 minute ahead of you. And then if you roll 1,000, it's any fictional character from any fictional universe will come to your aid.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what my portals or my tears kind of do, because I have things from like you end up in this plane, you end up in that plane. All the planes are scattered in there, like a different D&D little treasures in there. But you might also end up on the moon. You might end up in like an alternate reality where everything's made out of bananas or something. But like, or you might end up in the middle of World War II, or just something like a bunch of different little wacky things. Just little stuff like that.
How do you guys feel?
Throw them in there.
Yeah. How do you guys feel about including things from other fictional settings in your games? Like, for example, saying that, oh, if you cast a wish spell, you could wish yourself to like, I don't know, to the Death Star in the middle of episode 4. Like, or do you allow like something like Star Wars or Doctor Who, things like that, to be things that exist on different realities? Or if someone did something like that, you're like, yeah, that specific thing just doesn't exist?
So yes and no. Like, part of the reason why I made the tears is if I wanted to add like something like a little goofy from like another alternate universe, I wanted to legitimately add something from alternate universe, I can basically cover my ass with that. But my rule is always that you're not allowed to metagame. Like, if your character has no idea what the Death Star is, so you absolutely cannot do that, because that makes absolutely no sense, and you're just trying to be a goober. So
yeah,
that's my 2 cents.
Yeah. I guess for me, I like the idea of alternate realities, but personally, I feel like once you introduce something that is like more culturally significant that the players know from some other like from some other fictional setting, that kind of breaks the game a little bit, because I don't know. Just for me, it doesn't sit well.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you want to draw on something from, like, something directly from another fictional world, because, like, you can always rip off characters from other fictional worlds and just recontextualize them in your world. Like, I think depending on the character, that's fine, or kind of just, reskin or recontextualize an item from the world, that's fine. But if you're saying, like, no, you're literally meaning this character as you know them from this particular text, this particular piece of media, you have to go with something more obscure. So, like, in my last campaign, I brought in a character from the Dragonlance books, which none of the players knew, and so felt very in genre. And I just played them based on how I think that character would act, based on the books I've read. But the effect was overall, has a certain air of mystery to it. Versus if I literally brought in a character from like Star Wars or Star Trek or Lord of the Rings or what have you, then everyone would kind of see through it, and it wouldn't be as strong. Now, and I should say, I think it's okay if you bring in those sort of more well-known things as more of like a, depending on how serious you take your campaign, as a slightly more comedic effect. Like, I'll say,
Oh yeah.
oh yes, this character, you come up to this NPC and they look like X, Y, and Z, and they say this, and I'll quickly retcon. I'll be like, no, that doesn't actually happen. Like, I do that all the time for comedic reasons, but like, I don't literally say, yes, you literally meet like Kirk from Star Trek. He's literally here right now. The Kirk you see in the TV show and the movies is right here. That stuff, I think really does break players' suspension of disbelief in not the best ways.
Yeah, to come in from the other side of that, one thing that I've done that's actually been pretty interesting is I've incorporated, like, we all know how the player's handbook has a bunch of real-world pantheons in the back of the for stuff like, okay, I want to be a player for Thor or whatever. But I've basically kind of gone another step beyond that and incorporating them as just kind of stories and legends into the game that might have been heard of. Or to the point that basically the entirety of Shakespeare's plays exist in my universe as actual plays about another world. For the purpose of, okay, I wanted these guys to be like all about theater, like this faction. And I was like, okay, well, I'll just take a bunch of plays and the players will have some tangential knowledge about them. That's fine. Their characters have that same knowledge. So if they go and see Pyramus and Thisbe, and one of them did, and he kind of recognized it, and he's like, you bastard. That's clever. So using what your players already know as kind of substituting that into what their characters know, I think is fun, and it definitely a justifiable use for doing that sort of thing.
Yeah, I guess it kind of depends on the context, right? Because I feel like that is definitely a very well implemented way of doing that. But I guess it's like the difference between like suddenly the Death Star appears versus if you wanted to just say, okay, the Force is a thing that exists in my world. That's not bad. What might be bad is if you introduce like Obi-Wan Kenobi after not having the Force, after not having any other Star Wars related thing. Like, if you're already ingraining it heavily into your world, then that's a little bit different. I don't know if any of you saw that documentary about that guy who's been running the same campaign for like over 30 years or something like that. But basically, in his universe, Middle Earth exists, and like the Lord of the Rings story ties into his stuff. And I don't think there's a problem with that because he heavily implemented it into the world. I think it's more of a problem when you're implementing it from the realm of, oh, we're going to quickly touch on this because alternate reality shenanigans.
Yeah. I think you have to have like some sort of contingency that you follow, because otherwise you'll just devolve into like this mad swirling chaos of what is real and isn't real,
Yeah.
and it can really just derail the whole idea of what the campaign was made for. So I think I'm gonna take off a bunch of these goofy options that I put in the tears. So it was probably a good thing that we had this conversation, because
Well,
I'm
glad we can help.
before I really screwed the pooch on that one.
Mm-hmm.
It's a
And
good
like,
thing they're level 5.
yeah, and like it all depends on the flavor of fantasy you're trying to go for. Because even some of the most like famous fantasy worlds out there that we consider like top tier high fantasy second world are technically tied into the real world. Like Mill, based on Tolkien's writing, supposed to be like super prehistoric Earth. Same with the world of Conan and all that stuff. So like, I don't think there's any. So like, there's always a precedent in fantasy fiction for those sorts of things. I think it really is kind of depends on the role that having a secondary world, that's not really connected to worlds and from other things outside D&D, for instance. The role of that fantasy that we're playing in the secondary world has in the story that you're trying to tell. Like if you're trying to tell a story where that's maybe a bit more, maybe a bit more goofy, maybe a bit more like Terry Pratchett almost, like I don't think there's anything wrong with having, occasionally you meet someone from the real world, or occasionally you meet someone from, this fictional universe that everyone's familiar with, if it works with the tone that you set up at the beginning. But if like having a secondary world, you're using it and saying that you're using it as part of your dramatic storytelling, then yes, just throwing in famous, well-known things without contextualizing them whatsoever and trying to treat them as with all seriousness is. I'm sure you can. I'm sure you can do it. I'm sure if someone very talented can do it, but I could see that really backfiring if you're not super careful about it.
Yeah, I think just my 2 cents on that is, if you're going to do something weird and out of the box like that, I think the only way it could actually work and be successful is if you truly commit to it. So it can't just be a in and out thing, and this happened, and then 5 minutes later in the same session, yeah, it's gone. So like for instance, let's say you're running a super high fantasy game or even low fantasy game, and the Death Star actually appears out of nowhere, and you're not willing to let that Death Star stay in for the entire campaign or even for a session or two, then it'll completely ruin the overall tone of your game and just make it feel gimmicky if you're trying to make a game serious. Or even if you're running a gimmicky game, might make it too gimmicky. I don't know. But I think the way to do it is, if you're going to do stuff out of the box like that, to actually commit to it. Don't have Chuck Norris pop in for 2 rounds in combat and then jump out because you don't know that much about Chuck Norris and you don't feel confident running a Chuck Norris. So, yeah, I think if you're going to do
Them's fighting words, Khalil. You take that back.
Yeah,
I'm just playing.
I think the takeaway is tone is everything with that sort of thing.
That's
Yeah.
a very good way to put it. I think,
Mhm.
yeah, like Khalil said, like you don't want to get too gimmicky. I think that was a very good way to put it, and you got to maintain a tone. I think that's really important. That's where my last campaign went very, very awry, because I was trying to like force this like kind of gritty seriousness and kind of like grim sort of tone, but a lot of some of like my NPCs really didn't follow that, and then the players were kind of confused, and then they were out there being goofy, and we had some other issues. But with this campaign, I have a pretty good balance of where the tone lies, and like it depends on where they are, because I have a pretty big world. But I think that's a tone that's a really good word. That's a good way to describe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I personally am going to be signing off as I need to get ready for the live stream. If you guys want to jump on the live stream, I mean, you guys can. If you guys would like to continue conversing without me, go right ahead. I did record this week's call. Is that okay with everyone?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm down.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So I'm literally going to record an intro and then just plaster on the YouTubes. So, and cause I think there are a lot of great nuggets of information in here that you guys are just amazing DMs in giving out. So yeah, but yeah, I'm gonna sign off and get started on live stream, and you guys can hop on over. I'll link it in the announcements channel. That way, you guys can actually get to the live stream.
Yeah, cool.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
Well, it's good to talk to you guys.
All right.
Yeah, good talk with all y'all.
Have a great night, guys.
You too.
Yeah.
You too.